Elena Morris rubbed her tired eyes as she hurried through the airport terminal. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the polished floor as she checked her watch for the 10th time. She was late, again. After working a 12-hour night shift at Memorial Hospital, she had barely made it home to shower and grab her already packed backpack before rushing to the airport. "Gate 23B, she muttered to herself, squinting at the boarding pass on her phone. Her first vacation in 3 years, and she was already messing it up. Since her parents died in that car accident 2 years ago, Elena's life had become an endless cycle of work, bills, and taking care of her younger brother, Tommy. At 26, she felt like she was 46. This weekend getaway to Atlantic City with her nursing school friend Megan was supposed to be her big break. 2 days of no responsibilities, no overtime shifts, and no worrying about Tommy, who was staying with their aunt. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Where are you?" "They're boarding now." "Almost there," Elena texted back, though she wasn't sure where there was anymore. The airport signs blurred together as exhaustion clouded her vision. 2 hours of sleep wasn't enough for anyone, especially someone who had spent the night monitoring ICU patients. Elena turned a corner and saw a small gathering of people near a doorway. That must be it, she thought. The sign above read, "Private Aviation Terminal." That didn't sound right, but she was too tired to think clearly. A woman in a crisp uniform smiled as Elena approached. "Ms. Jenkins, we've been expecting you." Elena opened her mouth to correct her, but was interrupted by another uniformed staff member. "We are ready for boarding now. Mr. Carter is already on board." Elena blinked in confusion. Mr. Carter? Who was that? Before she could form a coherent question, she was being gently guided down a walkway toward an aircraft that looked nothing like the commercial planes she was used to. "Wait, I think there's been a mistake," Elena finally managed, but the flight attendant was already taking her backpack. "Don't worry about a thing. Mr. Carter said you might be running late. He's very understanding." The interior of the jet made Elena's jaw drop. Cream leather seats, wood paneling, and what looked like a fully stocked bar greeted her. This was definitely not her budget flight to Atlantic City. A man sat with his back to her, looking out the window. As the door closed behind her with a pressurized whoosh, he turned. Elena's tired brain registered several things at once. He was younger than she expected, maybe around 30. He was wearing clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. And he was strikingly handsome in a way that made her suddenly conscious of her faded jeans and simple t-shirt. His eyes widened slightly as he saw her, then narrowed in what seemed like curiosity. "You're not Vanessa Jenkins," he said. It wasn't a question. "No, I'm Elena Morris," she replied, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "And I think I just got on the wrong plane." The man's serious expression cracked and a small smile appeared. It would seem so. The engines of the plane hummed to life, and Elena felt panic rising in her chest. "I need to get off. I'm supposed to be on a flight to Atlantic City with my friend." "I'm afraid we're already cleared for takeoff," he said, gesturing to the window where the ground crew was already moving away from the aircraft. "I'm Damian Carter, by the way." "Where is this plane going?" Elena asked, sinking into the seat opposite him as her legs suddenly felt too weak to support her. "Paris," Damian replied simply. "Paris, as in Paris, France?" Elena's voice rose an octave. Damian nodded, studying her with interest. "You really did get on the wrong plane, didn't you?" "I don't even have a passport," Elena exclaimed, then remembered she actually did. It was in her backpack, virtually unused since that one college trip to Canada years ago. "The staff obviously thought you were my companion for the trip," Damian explained, choosing his words carefully. "Vanessa Jenkins is a model I occasionally date. We were supposed to spend the weekend in Paris, but it seems she's been replaced." The full reality of the situation hit Elena like a truck. She was on a private jet to Paris with a complete stranger who thought she was a model, and the plane was already moving. "This can't be happening," she mumbled, running her hands through her messy brown hair. "I need to call Megan. I need to figure out how to get back. I need to breathe," Damian finished for her, his voice surprisingly gentle. He handed her a glass of water that seemed to appear from nowhere. "Drink this." Elena took the water with shaking hands. "Mr. Carter, Damian, please." "Damian, I can't go to Paris. I have a shift on Monday. I have my brother to take care of. I have responsibilities. Something in Damien's expression shifted at the word responsibilities. He leaned back in his seat, studying her. What do you do, Elena Morris? I'm a nurse at Memorial Hospital, she replied automatically. Intensive care unit. Damien nodded slowly. And the brother you mentioned? Tommy. He's 18. Our parents died 2 years ago and I'm all he has. The words came out before she could stop them. Why was she telling this stranger her life story? The plane was now taxiing down the runway, picking up speed. I understand responsibility, Damien said, his voice taking on a more somber tone. More than most. For a moment, they sat in silence as the plane lifted into the air. Elena felt a strange mix of terror and something else, a feeling she couldn't quite name. Look, Damien finally said as the plane leveled off. We're going to Paris, whether we like it or not at this point. Once we land, I can have you on the first flight back to wherever you need to go. You'd do that? Elena asked, surprised by his offer. Of course, this mix-up isn't your fault. He paused, then added with a hint of that earlier smile. Though, I'm curious how you managed to get through private aviation security and onto my plane. Elena felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. I was so tired. I just finished a night shift and I've barely slept. I saw people gathered at a gate and just followed, and no one stopped you or asked for identification. Someone called me Ms. Jenkins. I tried to correct them, but everything happened so fast. Damien shook his head, looking almost impressed. Well, Miss Morris, it seems you've accidentally infiltrated a security system that costs millions to maintain. For the first time since boarding the plane, Eleanor laughed. It was a small, tired laugh, but it broke some of the tension. The flight attendant appeared with a tray of food that made Elena realize how hungry she was. As Damien motioned for her to help herself, she cautiously took a sandwich that looked fancier than any food she'd eaten in months. So, Damien said, watching her with those intense eyes, tell me about being a nurse? Elena wasn't sure why, but she started talking. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or the absurdity of the situation, or the fact that Damien Carter was actually listening, really listening, in a way that made her feel like her words mattered. She told him about her long shifts, about the patients she'd helped save, and the ones she couldn't. She told him about struggling to pay Tommy's college application, fees while keeping up with the mortgage their parents had left behind. In turn, Damien shared small pieces of himself. He ran a technology company. He traveled frequently. He'd lost someone close to him recently, his business partner and best friend, though he didn't elaborate on how. Is that why you're going to Paris? Elena asked. To get away? Damien looked, surprised by her insight. Perhaps, though I'm not sure there's anywhere far enough. Hours passed, and Elena felt herself drifting off to sleep in the comfortable seat. She fought to keep her eyes open, worried about what might happen if she let her guard down. You should rest, Damien said, noticing her struggle. We still have several hours before we land. I can't just fall asleep on a stranger's private jet, Elena protested weakly. I think we've moved past being strangers, Damien replied. Besides, I promised to be a perfect gentleman. There was something in his voice that made Elena believe him. Despite all logical reasons not to, she trusted him. Just a short nap, she conceded, her eyelids already feeling too heavy to keep open. She drifted off to sleep. Elena had the strange thought that maybe, just maybe, getting on the wrong plane wasn't the worst mistake she'd ever made. When Elena woke up, the world outside the plane window had changed. Soft blankets of clouds floated beneath them, tinged pink and orange by the setting sun. For a moment, she forgot where she was, and then it all came rushing back. She straightened in her seat, embarrassed to find that a blanket had been placed over her while she slept. Damien was sitting across from her, working on a sleek laptop. Welcome back, he said without looking up. You've been asleep for almost 6 hours. 6 hours? Eleanor couldn't remember the last time she'd slept that long, uninterrupted. You clearly needed it, Damien replied, finally closing his laptop. We'll be landing in Paris in about an hour. Reality crashed down on Elena again. I need to call my brother and Megan. They must be worried sick. Damien handed her a phone. International service. Take all the time you need. Elena dialed Tommy's number first, relieved when he answered right away. Elena, where are you? Megan called, looking for you hours ago. Tommy, you're not going to believe this, Elena said, glancing at Damien, who had diplomatically moved to give her some privacy. I got on the wrong plane. The wrong plane? What does that even mean? It means I'm currently on my way to Paris, France. The silence on the other end lasted so long that Elena thought they'd been disconnected. Tommy, are you there? You're in Paris. My sister, who hasn't taken a day off in 2 years, is in Paris. Almost in Paris, Elena corrected. It was an accident. I'm coming right back. An accident? How do you accidentally go to Paris? Elena sighed. It's complicated. I'll explain everything when I get back. Are you okay until then? Is Aunt Carol treating you all right? I'm 18, Elena, not 8. I'm fine, but you're really in Paris. That's actually kind of cool. It's not cool. It's a disaster, Elena insisted, though a small part of her couldn't help but agree with her brother. Who are you with? Tommy asked, suddenly sounding suspicious. Elena lowered her voice. The owner of the plane. His name is Damien Carter. Wait, the Damien Carter? The tech genius? The billionaire? What? No, just a businessman named Damien. Look, I have to go. I'll call you when I land, okay? After hanging up with Tommy, Elena called Megan, who was far less understanding. After confirming that Elena was safe, Megan berated her for ruining their weekend plans, before eventually laughing at the absurdity of it all. Only you, Elena, Megan said. Only you could work a double shift and then accidentally end up on a private jet to Paris. When Elena finally handed the phone back to Damien, she felt slightly calmer. Thank you. Everything okay at home? He asked. Yes, just a lot of explaining to do. Elena paused, then added, My brother seems to think he knows who you are. He called you a tech genius and a billionaire. Something flickered across Damien's face. Discomfort, maybe. I own a successful technology company, he said carefully. Your brother might have read about it. Before Elena could ask more questions, the plane began its descent, and the lights of Paris appeared below them, countless twinkling stars spreading out in every direction. It's beautiful, Elena whispered, pressing her face against the window. It is, Damien agreed, but when she turned, he wasn't looking at the city lights. He was looking at her. The private jet touched down smoothly at Charles de Gaulle Airport. Elena felt her heart racing as the reality of being in Paris, actually in Paris, began to sink in. This wasn't supposed to happen to people like her, people who worked double shifts and clipped coupons and worried about making rent. We'll be escorted through a private terminal, Damien explained as the plane taxied to a stop. No customs lines. Elena clutched her backpack nervously. Is that even legal? Damien's lips curved into a small smile. Perfectly, just one of the perks of private travel. A sleek black car was waiting for them on the tarmac. The driver, a middle-aged Frenchman named Michel, greeted Damien with familiar respect and Elena with curious glances. To the hotel, sir? Michel asked as he held the car door open. Yes, please, Damien replied, then turned to Elena. Unless you'd prefer to go straight to the airport for a return flight? Elena hesitated. The sensible thing would be to turn around immediately, to go home to Tommy and her job and her responsibilities. But the lights of Paris glowed in the distance, and something inside her rebelled at the thought of leaving, without seeing anything of the city she'd dreamed about visiting since she was a little girl. Maybe I could stay just for the night? The words tumbled out before she could stop them. My next shift isn't until Monday evening. Surprise flickered across Damien's face, followed by something that looked suspiciously like pleasure. The hotel has plenty of rooms. You'd have your own space, of course. I couldn't let you pay for... Eleanor, Damien cut her off gently. You're here because of a mix-up that wasn't your fault. Let me at least make sure you're comfortable before you go back. Too tired to argue and too tempted to refuse, Elena nodded. Thank you. The car glided through the streets of nighttime Paris, and Elena found herself pressing her face against the window like a child. The Eiffel Tower sparkled in the distance, and elegant buildings lined the wide boulevards. It's even more beautiful than I imagined, she whispered. When was the last time you traveled? Damien asked, watching her reaction with interest. A trip to Canada during nursing school. 6 years ago. Elena turned to look at him. I'm guessing. You travel all the time? Too much, he admitted. It lost its magic a long time ago. That's sad, Elena said simply. Damien looked at her thoughtfully. Maybe it is. The hotel was unlike anything Elena had ever seen. The lobby gleamed with marble and crystal chandeliers, and the staff seemed to materialize out of nowhere to assist them. Mr. Carter, welcome back to La Royale, the manager greeted them. We've prepared the presidential suite as requested. Thank you, Jean-Paul. We'll also need a separate room for Ms. Morris. Jean-Paul barely blinked at the change in plans. Of course, sir, we have a lovely junior suite available on the same floor. Elena followed in a daze as they were escorted to an elevator with gold-plated doors. Her room, a junior suite that was bigger than her entire apartment back home, featured a balcony with a view of the Eiffel Tower and a bathroom with a tub she could practically swim in. Is everything satisfactory? Jean-Paul asked as the bellhop delivered her backpack. Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Mr. Carter has arranged for a selection of clothes to be delivered in the morning, he continued. If you need anything at all, simply dial 0 on the telephone. After they left, Elena sank onto the edge of the king-sized bed, overwhelmed. She'd gone from rushing to catch a budget flight to Atlantic City to staying in a luxury hotel in Paris in less than 24 hours. It felt like she'd stumbled into someone else's life. Her phone buzzed with a text from Damien. Breakfast at 9? The hotel restaurant is on the roof. Incredible views. Elena hesitated before typing back. Okay, but I need to figure out a flight home tomorrow. His reply came quickly. We'll sort it out. Sleep well, Elena. Despite her exhaustion, Elena found it hard to fall asleep. The bed was too soft, the room too quiet, the situation too surreal. She kept expecting to wake up in her cramped bedroom in New Jersey, late for her shift again. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed of flying over cities of light, with Damien Carter's mysterious eyes watching her from across endless skies. Morning came with golden sunlight streaming through curtains she'd forgotten to close. For a moment, Elena was disoriented. Then it all came rushing back. Paris, the private jet, Damien Carter. A glance at her phone showed it was already 8:30. She'd slept nearly 10 hours, something she hadn't done in years. Elena rushed to shower, wincing as she put on the same clothes from yesterday. As promised, at exactly 9 quick, there was a knock at her door. A hotel employee stood there with several garment bags and boxes. Compliments of Mr. Carter, the woman explained in accented English. He thought you might appreciate some fresh clothes. Before Elena could protest, the bags were laid across her bed, and the woman was gone. Inside, she found several simple but clearly expensive outfits, all mysteriously in her size. Jeans, blouses, dresses, even shoes and underwear. The thought of Damien selecting underwear for her made her face burn, though she suspected he'd probably had an assistant handle the actual shopping. Elena chose the least fancy option, dark jeans and a soft blue sweater that felt like a cloud against her skin. She couldn't remember the last time she'd worn anything new that wasn't a hospital uniform. The rooftop restaurant took her breath away. Glass walls provided a panoramic view of Paris in the morning light, the city spread out below like a living postcard. Damien was already seated at a corner table, reading something on a tablet. He looked up as she approached, and for a second, Elena saw something flicker in his eyes. Appreciation, maybe, or surprise. You look rested, he said, standing to pull out her chair. The clothes fit okay? Yes, thank you. But you really didn't have to. I wanted to, he said simply, cutting off her protest. Consider it an apology for the mix-up that brought you here. A waiter appeared with coffee and freshly baked pastries that made Elena's mouth water. As they ate, Damien explained that he'd managed to get her a seat on a flight back to New York the following evening. Tomorrow? Elena asked, surprised. Not today. All the direct flights were full, Damien said, not quite meeting her eyes. Unless you'd prefer a connecting flight through London or Frankfurt. Elena should have insisted on leaving immediately. That would have been the responsible thing to do. But the thought of one day, just one day, in Paris was too tempting. Tomorrow is fine, she said. feeling a strange mixture of guilt and excitement. "I'll call Tommy and let him know." "Good," Damien said, looking genuinely pleased. "Then I have a proposal for you." Elena raised an eyebrow, suddenly wary. "Nothing improper," he added quickly, noticing her expression. "I thought perhaps I could show you Paris today. The real Paris, not just the tourist sites." "Why would you do that?" Elena asked, genuinely puzzled. "You must have better things to do than play tour guide for a stranger." Damien set down his coffee cup, considering her question seriously. "Because for the first time in a very long time, I'm actually curious about something. Someone, other than myself or my work." His honesty caught her off guard. "I don't understand. You're different, Elena Morris. You didn't recognize me when we met. You don't seem impressed by the plane or the hotel or any of this." He gestured around them. "Do you know how rare that is in my world?" "I'm just a normal person," Elena said, shrugging. "Exactly." Damien smiled, and it transformed his face completely, making him look younger and less guarded. "So, what do you say? One day in Paris with a not entirely normal person?" Against her better judgment, Elena found herself smiling back. "Okay, one day." They started at a small cafe tucked away on a side street, where Damien ordered for them in fluent French. The owner greeted him like an old friend, kissing him on both cheeks and casting curious glances at Elena. "Do you come to Paris often?" Elena asked, as they sipped espresso at a tiny table on the sidewalk. "I lived here for a while after college," Damien explained. "Before I started the company with—" He trailed off, a shadow crossing his face. "With your friend?" Elena prompted gently. "The one you mentioned on the plane?" Damien nodded, his expression closing off. "Mark. His name was Mark Fitzgerald." The way he said the name, with a mixture of pain and reverence, told Elena that this was a subject to approach carefully. "What was he like?" she asked. For a moment she thought Damien wouldn't answer. Then quietly he said, "Brilliant, fearless, the best person I've ever known." "I'm sorry for your loss," Elena said, recognizing the grief in his voice. Damien looked at her sharply. "I didn't say he died. You didn't have to." Working in the ICU had given Elena an intimate familiarity with loss. "It's in the way you talk about him." Damien was quiet for a long moment. "It was a year ago, a climbing accident in Colorado. We'd been friends since college, built the company together from nothing." He took a deep breath. "After he died, I couldn't bear to be in the office anymore. Everything reminded me of him. So you started traveling," Elena guessed. "Running, more like it." Damien's smile was bitter. "Not very brave of me, is it?" "Grief isn't about bravery," Elena said softly. "It's about survival." Damien looked at her with new interest. "You sound like you know something about it." "My parents died 2 years ago. Car accident." The words still hurt to say, but the sharp pain had dulled to a persistent ache. "That's when I became responsible for Tommy." "How old was he?" 16. Too young to lose both parents, but then again, who isn't? They sat in silence for a moment, connected by the shared experience of loss in a way Elena hadn't expected. "Come on," Damien said finally, standing and offering his hand. "I want to show you something." He led her through winding streets to a small, hidden garden behind an ancient church. Spring flowers bloomed in wild profusion, and a stone bench sat beneath a flowering cherry tree. "I used to come here to think when I lived in Paris," Damien explained. "Very few tourists know about it." They sat on the bench, watching as pink petals drifted down around them like snow. "It's peaceful," Elena said, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. "Mark and I once had a plan to retire in Paris," Damien said, looking up at the branches above them. "We were going to buy apartments in the same building, grow old complaining about young people in French." Elena smiled at the image. "That sounds nice." "It was never going to happen," Damien admitted. "We were both too obsessed with the company. Always one more project, one more deal." He shook his head. "Now, I'd give anything to have that time back." Elena understood that feeling all too well. How many times had she picked up extra shifts, missing Tommy's soccer games or school events, always thinking there would be more time later. "We can't change the past," she said gently. "Believe me, I've tried. Damien looked at her with those intense eyes that seemed to see straight through her. What would you change if you could? I'd have spent more time with my parents, Eleanor admitted, especially in those last few years. I was so busy with nursing school and then my career that I just assumed they'd always be there. That's the trap, isn't it? Damien said quietly. We're always looking forward, never at what's right in front of us. For a moment, their eyes met, and Elena felt something shift between them. A connection deeper than polite conversation between strangers. The moment was broken by a church bell ringing nearby. Hungry? Damien asked, standing and offering his hand again. This time Elena took it without hesitation. They spent the afternoon wandering through parts of Paris that Elena suspected most tourists never saw. Local markets, hidden courtyards, tiny bookshops and art galleries tucked away in historic buildings. Damien was a different person here, away from the private jets and luxury hotels. More relaxed, more open, occasionally even funny. He told her stories about his college days with Mark, about their first failed business attempt, a food delivery app that crashed on its first day, and about finally hitting it big with their security software company, Denmark Technologies. In turn, Elena shared stories about growing up in a small New Jersey town, about her decision to become a nurse after her grandmother's illness, and about Tommy's dreams of becoming a doctor. He's smart enough, she said proudly as they walked along the Seine in the late afternoon light. He got accepted to several good pre-med programs. I'm just worried about the cost. Scholarships? Damien asked. Some, but not enough. I've been taking extra shifts to help with tuition, but... She trailed off, not wanting to dampen the day with financial worries. Damien frowned slightly but didn't press the issue. As the sun began to set, they found themselves at a small restaurant on a quiet street in Montmartre. The owner greeted Damien warmly and led them to a corner table with a candle and a small vase of fresh flowers. I hope you like authentic French cuisine, Damien said as they settled in. Marcel doesn't believe in menus, he just cooks what's fresh that day. The food was incredible, simple but perfectly prepared dishes that made Elena close her eyes in appreciation with every bite. Damien ordered a bottle of wine that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget, but she decided not to think about that. Why nursing? Damien asked as they lingered over dessert, a delicate chocolate soufflé that melted on Elena's tongue. I like helping people, she said with a shrug, and I'm good at staying calm in emergencies. That's it? No dramatic story? About a childhood illness or a TV show that inspired you? Elena laughed. Sorry to disappoint you, not everything has to have a dramatic backstory. In my experience, the most important choices usually do, Damien replied. Elena thought about it for a moment. Well, there was my grandmother. She got sick when I was in high school. Cancer. The nurses who took care of her were amazing. They made a terrible situation bearable, not just for her, but for our whole family. She paused, remembering. One night, when Grandma was in a lot of pain, this nurse named Sarah sat with us for hours after her shift ended. She didn't have to do that, but she did. I wanted to be that person for someone else. Damien was watching her with a warmth in his eyes that made Elena's heart beat a little faster. What? She asked, suddenly self-conscious. You're remarkable, Elena Morris, he said softly. You know that, right? Elena felt her cheeks flush. I'm really not. I'm just doing my best with what I've got, which is exactly what makes you remarkable. Damien reached across the table and touched her hand lightly. Most people in your position would be bitter or looking for an escape, but you just keep going, taking care of everyone around you. I don't have a choice, Eleanor said, though she didn't pull her hand away. We always have choices, Damien replied. You've chosen to be strong when it would be easier not to be. The way he was looking at her made Elena feel both seen and exposed in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. This man, this wealthy, complicated, grieving man, seemed to understand her better after one day than people she'd known for years. As they walked back to the hotel under a sky full of stars, Elena found herself wishing that tomorrow would never come. That she could stay in this bubble of Paris with Damien Carter, where real life and all its problems seemed very far away. But reality was waiting, and tomorrow she would be back on a plane, heading home to her normal life of hospital shifts and bills and taking care of Tommy. This magical day would become just a strange story to tell, a memory that would seem less real with each passing year. Back at the hotel, Damien walked her to her room door. "Thank you for today," Eleanor said, suddenly, shy. "It was perfect." "The pleasure was mine," Damien replied, his voice low. He hesitated, then added, "Would you have dinner with me again tomorrow before your flight? There's another place I'd like to show you." Elena knew she should say no. Spending more time with Damien would only make it harder to leave. But the thought of one more evening in his company was too tempting to resist. "I'd like that," she said softly. For a moment they stood there, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. Then Damien leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek. "Good night, Elena," he whispered, his breath warm against her skin. "Good night, Damien," she replied, her voice barely audible. As she closed the door behind her, Eleanor leaned against it, her heart pounding. What was she doing? Getting involved with someone like Damien Carter could only lead to heartbreak. They lived in completely different worlds, and yet as she got ready for bed, Elena couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive, not just surviving, but living. That night, she dreamed of Paris streets and Damien's smile and possibilities she'd never dared to imagine before. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through her hotel room window and the distant sounds of Paris traffic. For a moment she lay still, savoring the softness of the sheets and the lingering dream of walking along the Seine with Damien. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from Tommy. "How's Paris with your billionaire? Send pics." Elena smiled and shook her head. Her brother had always had an active imagination. She quickly typed back, "He's not my anything, and I'll be home tomorrow." Another buzz. "Looked him up online. Damien? Carter is worth like $4 billion. His company makes security software. There are pics of him with celebrities and everything." Eleanor frowned, sitting up in bed. $4 billion, that couldn't be right. She grabbed her phone and typed Damien Carter Tech CEO into the search bar. Hundreds of results appeared instantly. Images of Damien at charity galas, tech conferences and business awards. Articles about Denmark Technologies and its revolutionary security systems. Lists of 30 under 30 and most eligible tech bachelors. One headline caught her eye. Tech billionaire Damien Carter retreats from public eye after partner's death. Elena clicked on it, her heart racing. The article, dated 8 months ago, described how Damien had become increasingly reclusive after the death of Mark Fitzgerald in a climbing accident. The company's stock had taken a hit as rumors swirled about Damien's mental state and the future of Denmark Technologies. There was even speculation about Damien selling his shares and walking away from the empire he'd built with his late friend. "Oh my God," Elena whispered, sinking back against the pillows. She wasn't just hanging out with some random rich guy. Damien Carter was apparently one of the wealthiest men in America, the kind of person who appeared on magazine covers and financial news shows, and he'd let her think he was just an ordinary businessman. Elena felt a wave of embarrassment wash over her. Had he been laughing at her naivety this whole time? Playing some kind of game with the clueless nurse who'd stumbled onto his private jet? Her phone buzzed again with another text from Tommy. "Hello? Are you dating a billionaire?" "I am not dating anyone," Elena typed back furiously. "And I'll explain everything when I get home." A knock at the door made her jump. Wrapping herself in the plush hotel robe, Eleanor peered through the peephole to see a hotel staff member with a rolling cart. "Breakfast, Ms. Morris," the young woman announced cheerfully when Elena opened the door. "Compliments of Mr. Carter." Before Elena could protest, the woman wheeled in a cart laden with fresh pastries, fruit, coffee, and a small vase holding a single red rose. "Mr. Carter asked me to inform you that he has a business meeting this morning, but hopes you'll join him for lunch at noon in the lobby," the woman said, handing Eleanor a small envelope. After she left, Eleanor opened the envelope to find a handwritten note. "Eleanor, business calls, unfortunately. Feel free to explore the hotel or rest this morning. The concierge can arrange anything you need. Looking forward to lunch and showing you more of Paris before your flight tonight." "Damien," Elena set the note down. her feelings a complicated mix of anger, confusion, and, she had to admit, a lingering attraction that hadn't been dimmed by her discovery of Damien's true status. She ate the breakfast, which was delicious despite her turmoil, then showered and dressed in another of the outfits that had been delivered, a simple sundress that fit her perfectly. Instead of waiting in her room, Elena decided to explore the hotel. The concierge offered to arrange a spa treatment or shopping excursion, but she politely declined, preferring to wander the elegant public spaces on her own. In a quiet corner of the hotel's library, she found herself staring out at the Paris skyline, trying to make sense of the last 2 days. How had she gone from her normal struggling life to being in Paris with a man who could apparently buy and sell her hometown without blinking? Penny for your thoughts. Elena turned to find Damien standing behind her, looking slightly less formal than yesterday in dark jeans and a light blue button-down shirt that matched his eyes. "I think they're worth a bit more than that," Elena replied, a hint of challenge in her voice, "especially to a billionaire." Damien's expression shifted, a flicker of what might have been guilt crossing his features. "Ah, you've been doing some research." "My brother did, actually." Elena crossed her arms. "Were you ever going to tell me, or was watching the clueless nurse fumble through your world too entertaining?" "Elena, no." Damien stepped closer, his voice earnest. "It wasn't like that at all." "Then what was it like? Because from where I'm standing, you've been less than honest with me." Damien ran a hand through his hair, looking surprisingly vulnerable. "You're right. I should have been upfront about who I am." He gestured to a nearby couch. "Can we sit, please?" Elena hesitated, then nodded, keeping a careful distance between them as they sat. "When you first walked onto that plane," Damien began, "I was intrigued. You clearly had no idea who I was, which almost never happens anymore. And then you told me about your life, your real life, with real problems and challenges. And He paused, searching for the right words. "I wanted to stay in that space where I was just a person to you, not a headline or a net worth figure." "So you lied to me." "I didn't lie," Damien countered. "I just didn't volunteer information." "That would have changed how you saw me." "That's splitting hairs, Damien. Maybe." He looked at her directly. "But can you honestly tell me you would have been as open with me yesterday if you'd known the full story?" Elena wanted to say yes, but she knew it wasn't true. She would have been guarded, self-conscious, probably even suspicious of his motives. "That's not the point," she said instead. "The point is that I deserved the chance to make that choice for myself." "You're right," Damien admitted, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I'm sorry, Elena. Truly." His apology seemed sincere, and despite her anger, Elena found herself softening. "Why did you do it, really?" Damien was quiet for a moment, looking out at the Paris skyline. "For the past year since Mark died, people have treated me differently, like I'm made of glass or like I'm nothing but a walking checkbook. My business partners tiptoe around me, afraid I'll walk away from the company. Women approach me with dollar signs in their eyes." He turned back to Elena. "And then there was you, exhausted, annoyed, completely unimpressed by me or my plane or any of it. It was refreshing." "So I was a novelty," Elena said flatly. "No." Damien shook his head, firmly. "You are real in a way that almost nothing in my life has felt since Mark died. Yesterday, showing you Paris, talking to you, it was the first time in a year that I didn't feel like I was just going through the motions." There was such raw honesty in his voice that Elena found it hard to maintain her anger. Still, she wasn't ready to let him off the hook completely. "You should have told me." "I know." Damien nodded. "And I was going to. Tonight at dinner. I just wanted one more day of being just Damien to you." Elena studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or dishonesty, but found only genuine regret and something else. A vulnerability that seemed at odds with his public image as a tech titan. "I don't know what to say," she finally admitted. "Say." "You'll still have lunch with me," Damien suggested, a hopeful note in his voice. "And dinner before your flight, let me make it up to you." Elena knew the sensible thing would be to walk away now, to protect herself from getting any more entangled with this complicated man and the complicated feelings he stirred in her. but the thought of spending her last day in Paris alone seemed unbearably sad. "Okay," she agreed cautiously. "Lunch, but I want you to be honest with me from now on. No more convenient omissions." "Deal." Damien's relief was palpable. Complete honesty from here on out. Lunch was at a small cafe overlooking the Seine, far from the luxury hotel and the touristy areas of Paris. As they ate simple but delicious French food, Damien answered all of Elena's questions about his life. He told her about growing up with wealth but distant parents, about meeting Mark at MIT, where they'd bonded over their shared interest in computer security, and about the wild, early days of their company. "We were living on ramen and working 20-hour days," he recalled with a small smile. "Even after we got our first big investment, we kept our office in Mark's garage for another 6 months. We were too busy coding to bother moving." "When did he—" "You know you'd made it?" Elena asked, genuinely curious. "There was this moment," Damien said, his eyes distant with memory. "We just signed our first government contract. Mark and I went to this dive bar we used to hang out at in college and ordered the cheapest beer on the menu, same as always. The bartender recognized us from a story in the business section of the newspaper and tried to give us champagne on the house. Mark just laughed and said, 'We're still beer guys, maybe always will be.'" Damien's face clouded. That was Mark. Always grounded, always authentic. After he died, I lost that anchor. "Is that why you've been traveling so much?" Elena asked, gently. "To find a new anchor?" Damien looked at her with surprise, as if she'd articulated something he hadn't quite figured out himself. "Maybe. I've been calling it clearing my head. But yes, I think that's exactly what I've been trying to do." They spent the afternoon walking along the Seine, talking with an ease that belied their short acquaintance. Eleanor found that knowing the truth about Damien actually made it easier to connect with him. The invisible barrier that his secret had created was gone, allowing a new kind of intimacy to develop between them. "Can I ask you something personal?" Damien said as they paused on a bridge to watch a tour boat pass below them. "After everything we've talked about today, I think that's allowed," Elena replied with a small smile. "Why haven't you moved on from that hospital in New Jersey? With your skills and experience, you could work anywhere, make more money." Eleanor leaned against the railing, considering the question. "It's complicated. After my parents died, I needed stability for Tommy. Changing jobs, maybe moving to a new city. It just seemed like too much upheaval when our lives had already been turned upside down. And now, Tommy's 18, almost in college. Now there's the financial reality," Elena admitted. "I've been at Memorial long enough to have decent seniority, good shifts. Starting over somewhere else might mean more money eventually, but in the short term it would be a risk. And I can't afford risks right now, not with Tommy's tuition to think about." Damien nodded thoughtfully. "You've sacrificed a lot for your brother." "It's not a sacrifice when it's someone you love," Elena said simply. "Still," Damien persisted, "don't you ever think about what you want for yourself? Dreams you've put on hold?" The question hit closer to home than Elena was comfortable with. Of course she had dreams. Travel, further education, maybe even a relationship someday with someone who understood her complicated life. But those things had seemed so far out of reach for so long that she'd gotten used to not thinking about them. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But dreams don't pay the bills." "They could," Damien said quietly, "with the right support." Elena tensed, immediately understanding what he was suggesting. "I don't want your money, Damien." "I know you don't," he replied quickly. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" Damien seemed to struggle with his words, which was unusual for him. "I meant that maybe there's a way for you to have both, stability and dreams." Before Eleanor could respond, a street musician nearby began playing a hauntingly beautiful melody on a violin. The moment shifted, the conversation suspended in the notes of the music. As evening approached, they made their way to Montmartre, climbing the steps to the highest point in Paris. The city spread out below them, beginning to twinkle with lights as the sky darkened. "Your flight leaves in 3 hours," Damien said, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. "We should probably head back to the hotel soon so you can get your things." Elena nodded, a heaviness settling in her chest at the thought of leaving. These 2 days in Paris with Damien had been like a beautiful dream, But reality was waiting back home. Hospital shifts, bills, and the day-to-day struggles that defined her life. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. This has been more than I ever imagined." "Elena," Damien turned to face her, his expression serious. "What if you didn't get on that plane tonight?" She blinked in surprise. "What?" "Stay," he said, the word holding more weight than its single syllable suggested. "Stay in Paris with me." "Damien, I can't just—" "Why not?" He stepped closer, his eyes intense. "Tommy's with your aunt. You're not on shift until Monday evening. That's 2 more days." Elena's heart raced at the possibility. 2 more days in Paris, 2 more days with Damien. "I don't know. I have a house here," Damien continued, "just outside the city. It's peaceful. We could go there, spend some time away from everything, get to know each other better." The offer was tempting, so tempting that Elena almost said yes immediately. But a warning voice in the back of her mind held her back. "Damien, we live in completely different worlds," she said gently. "Whatever this is between us, it can't go anywhere real." "Why not?" he challenged. "Because I have money and you don't? That's just a circumstance, Elena, not a definition of who we are." "It's not that simple, and you know it," Elena countered. "Your life is private jets and luxury hotels and business empires. Mine is hospital shifts and student loans and making ends meet." "Those are just details," Damien insisted, taking her hands in his. "They don't have to define us, or what we could be to each other." Elena pulled her hands away, suddenly afraid of how much she wanted to believe him. "They're not just details, Damien. They're realities. And the reality is that I have responsibilities that I can't walk away from, not even for this." She gestured between them, not quite able to name what this was. Attraction? Connection? The beginning of something that might be love if given time to grow? Damien's face fell, disappointment clear in his eyes. "I understand responsibilities. Helena, I'm not asking you to abandon them. I'm just asking for a little more time." "Time for what?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Time to see if what I'm feeling for you is real," Damien answered honestly. "Because it feels real, Elena. More real than anything has felt in a very long time." Elena's breath caught in her throat, the intensity in his eyes, the vulnerability in his voice. They matched the confusing storm of emotions in her own heart. "I'm scared," she admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "Of what?" "Of letting myself believe in this. In you. In us." Elena took a shaky breath. "What happens when I go back to real life, and you realize that the struggling nurse from New Jersey doesn't fit into your world after all?" "That won't happen," Damien said firmly. "You can't know that," Elena countered. "I know how I feel when—" "I'm with you," Damien said, moving closer again. "I know that for the first time since Mark died, I'm thinking about the future, instead of just trying to escape the past." He reached up to touch her cheek gently. "Stay, Elena. Not forever. Just 2 more days. See where this might lead." Elena closed her eyes, leaning slightly into his touch. Everything in her wanted to say yes, to grab this unexpected chance at something beautiful and hold on tight. But she'd spent 2 years being the responsible one, putting everyone else's needs before her own. Could she really be selfish this once? "What about Tommy?" she asked, her practical nature asserting itself even now. "Call him," Damien suggested. "Make sure he's okay with your aunt for 2 more days. I can arrange for you to be back by Monday. Afternoon, plenty of time before your shift." It was a reasonable solution, addressing her main concern. What was holding her back now was just fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of getting hurt, fear of losing herself in Damien's world. Elena hesitated, standing on the precipice of a decision that felt momentous in ways she couldn't fully articulate. The lights of Paris seemed to wink at her encouragingly from below, as if the city itself was urging her to take this chance. To choose something unexpected and potentially wonderful, even if just for a little while. "Okay," she finally whispered. 2 more days. The smile that broke across Damien's face was like sunrise, warm and full of promise. He pulled her gently, into his arms, holding her as if she was something precious. "You won't regret it," he murmured against her hair. Elena wasn't sure if that was true. But as she stood there in his embrace, with Paris spread out below them and the stars appearing overhead, she knew one thing for certain: she would have regretted walking away. As they made their way back down the hill, hand in hand, Elena felt like she was stepping into a new version of her life, one where dreams weren't just distant impossibilities, but real, tangible things within her grasp. She called Tommy from the car, explaining her change of plans without going into detail about her feelings for Damien. To her surprise, her brother was entirely supportive. "Are you kidding? Stay in Paris. Aunt Carol's fine, and I've got study group all weekend anyway." There was a pause. Then Tommy added more seriously, "You deserve this, Elena. You've put your life on hold for me long enough." His words brought tears to her eyes. When had her little brother become so perceptive, so mature? "I love you, Tommy," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Love you too, sis. Now go have an adventure. Take lots of pictures." After hanging up, Elena looked over at Damien, who was pretending not to listen to her conversation. "Tommy says I should stay," she told him, a small smile playing on her lips. "Smart kid," Damien replied, his eyes warm as they met hers. "Must run in the family." Instead of going back to the hotel, Damien directed the driver to take them straight to his house in the French countryside. As they left the city behind, Eleanor felt a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness fluttering in her stomach. What had she just agreed to? 2 more days with a man she'd known for less than 48 hours. A man who lived in a world completely different from her own. A man who, despite his wealth and status, seemed just as lost and searching as she was. The car turned down a tree-lined driveway illuminated by subtle landscape lighting. At the end stood a beautiful stone house that looked like it had been there for centuries, though Eleanor could tell from the modernized windows and other details that it had been extensively renovated. "Home sweet home," Damien said as the car came to a stop. "At least one of them." "How many homes do you have?" Elena asked, genuinely curious. Damien looked slightly embarrassed. "A few. Apartment in New York, house in Malibu, chalet in Aspen, this place, and the penthouse in Boston where I actually spend most of my time." "Wow," Elena said, trying to imagine owning even one home, let alone 5. "It's excessive, I know," Damien admitted as he helped her from the car. "Mark used to give me a hard time about it. He kept the same 2-bedroom apartment even after we were worth billions." "He sounds like he was a good friend," Eleanor said softly. "The best," Damien agreed, a sad smile crossing his face. "He would have liked you, Eleanor, very much." The house was just as beautiful inside as out, elegant but comfortable with a mix of antique furniture and modern amenities. A housekeeper greeted them, seeming unsurprised by their arrival. "Madame Bertrand keeps the house ready for me," Damien explained as the older woman took their coats. "She lives in the guest house with her husband, who manages the grounds." After a light dinner prepared by Madame Bertrand, Damien gave Elena a tour of the house. The library, with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and comfortable reading nooks, was her favorite room. "This is amazing," she said, running her fingers along the spines of leather-bound classics. "I could spend days in here." "You're welcome to," Damien said, watching her with a fond expression that made her heart skip. "There's a guest room prepared for you upstairs. Blue door at the end of the hall." Elena's cheeks warmed at the implication that they would be sleeping separately. Of course they would. They'd known each other for all of 2 days. But something in the way Damien had said it made her wonder if he'd been considering other arrangements. The mainway. Thought sent a shiver of anticipation through her that she tried to ignore. Later, as she settled into the luxurious guest room with its canopy bed and view of the moonlit garden, Elena found herself wondering what she'd gotten herself into. This felt like a fairy tale. The ordinary girl swept into a world of luxury and romance by a handsome, wealthy man. But fairy tales weren't real, and reality had a way of reasserting itself eventually. In 2 days, she would be back in New Jersey, back to her real life. And what then? Would Damien Carter, billionaire tech CEO, really want to continue whatever this was with a nurse who could barely make ends meet? As she drifted off to sleep, Eleanor told herself not to get too attached, not to believe too much in this beautiful fantasy. But her heart, already starting to fall for the complicated man down the hall, wasn't listening. Elena woke to sunlight, streaming through the windows of her guest room. For a moment she lay still, taking in the elegant surroundings, the antique furniture, the silk curtains, the plush carpet beneath her feet as she finally slid out of bed. It felt like she'd stepped into someone else's life, someone who belonged in beautiful French country houses with billionaires down the hall. After a shower in the marble bathroom that was bigger than her entire apartment bathroom back home, Eleanor, dressed in a simple sundress from the clothes Damien had bought her, she made her way downstairs, following the scent of coffee and fresh bread. She found Damien in the kitchen, dressed casually in jeans and a light sweater, talking to Madame Bertrand in fluent French. He looked up when Elena entered, his entire face brightening. "Good morning," he said, switching to English. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in years," Eleanor admitted with a smile. "Your house is beautiful." "Our home for the next 2 days," Damien replied, pulling out a chair for her at the kitchen table where breakfast was laid out. "I thought we could take it easy today. There's a farmer's market in the village if you'd like to explore, or we could just relax here. The gardens are lovely this time of year." The casual way he spoke about their time together, as if it were the most natural thing in the world for her to be here with him, made Elena's heart flutter. It was dangerous. How quickly she was getting used to his presence, his attention, his world. "The market sounds nice," she said, helping herself to a croissant that looked and smelled heavenly. "I've never been to a real French farmer's market." "Then that's what we'll do," Damien said, pouring her a cup of coffee. "After breakfast, of course." The village was like something from a postcard. Stone buildings with flower boxes in the windows, narrow cobbled streets, and a central square where local farmers and artisans had set up their stalls. Damien seemed to know everyone, greeting villagers by name and introducing Elena as his friend from America. The way he navigated this simpler world, so different from private jets and luxury hotels, surprised her. "You seem comfortable here," she observed as they browsed a stall selling local honey. "More so than in Paris, even." Damien nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "This place, it's real in a way that a lot of my life isn't. The people here don't care about Denmark's stock price or who I'm dating or what the business blogs are saying about me. Is that why you bought a house here? To escape?" "Partly," Damien admitted, paying for a jar of honey without haggling over the price. "But also because it reminds me of summers when I was a kid. Before my parents got divorced, we used to rent a place in the French countryside. It's one of the few happy memories I have of us all together." Elena felt herself softening, further toward him. Behind the wealth and success was a man with his own scars, his own complicated past. "What about you?" Damien asked as they continued walking. "Any happy childhood memories you hold on to?" Eleanor thought for a moment. "My dad used to take Tommy and me camping every summer. Nothing fancy, just a tent in the state park about an hour from our house. We'd fish and tell ghost stories around the campfire." She smiled at the memory. "My mom would always pack way too much food and insist we call her every night to make sure we hadn't been eaten by bears." "Were there actually bears?" Damien asked, grinning. "Maybe one or two," Elena laughed, "but they were more interested in the campground dumpsters than in us. They spent the morning wandering through the market, buying fresh bread, cheese and fruit for a picnic lunch. The villagers treated them like any other couple, with no hint that they recognized Damien as anything other than a friendly American who owned a house nearby. It was liberating in a way Elena hadn't expected, to be just Elena and Damien, two people enjoying a beautiful day together with no past or future complicating the present. After the market, Damien drove them to a secluded spot by a river where ancient willow trees provided shade from the midday sun. They spread a blanket on the grass and unpacked their market purchases. "This is perfect," Elena sighed, leaning back on her elbows and tilting her face toward the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. "Yes, it is," Damien agreed, though when she glanced at him, he wasn't looking at the scenery but at her. The intensity in his gaze made her blush. "You're staring," she pointed out, suddenly self-conscious. "Sorry," Damien said, not looking sorry at all. It's just, you look happy, relaxed. It suits you." "I am happy," Eleanor admitted, surprising herself with the simple truth of it. "Happier than I've been in a long time." "Good," Damien said softly. "That's all I want." They ate their simple feast, talking about everything and nothing. Favorite books and movies, places they'd like to visit, childhood dreams. It felt both ordinary and extraordinary, this easy conversation between them. After lunch, they walked along the river hand in hand. Elena couldn't remember the last time she'd held hands with someone, probably not since her brief relationship with a fellow nursing student years ago. It felt good, this simple human connection. "Tell me something, real," Damien said suddenly as they paused to watch a family of ducks paddle past. "Something you haven't told anyone else." Elena considered the request. "Sometimes I resent Tommy," she admitted, the words difficult but somehow necessary. Not him exactly, but the responsibility. "I was 24 when our parents died. I had plans, dreams, a job offer at a research hospital in Boston." She sighed. "I gave it all up without hesitation because Tommy needed me, and I don't regret it, not really. But sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if things had been different." Damien squeezed her hand gently. "That doesn't make you a bad person, Elena. It makes you human." "Your turn," she said, relieved by his lack of judgment. "Tell me something real." Damien was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the water. "I blame myself for Mark's death," he finally said, his voice low. "We were supposed to go on that climbing trip together. It was an annual tradition, our way of disconnecting from work and just being friends again. But I cancelled at the last minute because of an important client meeting." His jaw tightened. "If I had been there, maybe I could have prevented the accident. Or maybe you would have been in the accident too," Elena said gently. "You can't know what would have happened." "That's what my therapist says," Damien admitted with a sad smile. "But knowing it logically doesn't change how I feel." Elena understood that all too well. How many times had she wondered if she could have saved her parents if she'd been home that weekend instead of picking up an extra shift at the hospital? "Grief isn't logical," she said, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head against his chest. "And neither is guilt." Damien held her close, his heart beating steady under her ear. For a long moment, they simply stood there by the river, two wounded people finding comfort in each other's understanding. That evening, they cooked dinner together in the spacious kitchen, a simple pasta dish with fresh ingredients from the market. Elena was surprised to discover that Damien knew his way around a kitchen. "Mark's mom taught us both to cook in college," he explained as he expertly chopped garlic. "She said no son of hers, biological or honorary, was going to live on ramen and takeout." "She sounds like a wise woman," Elena said, grating Parmesan cheese. "She was," Damien agreed. "She died about 5 years ago. Cancer." He paused in his chopping. Mark took it hard. He was an only child, and after his dad left when he was a kid, it was just the two of them. "I'm sorry," Elena said softly. Damien nodded, then continued preparing the meal. "That's why I understood what you were going through with Tommy. Mark talked a lot about what it was like losing his only parent, how it changed everything." The parallels between their experiences struck Elena anew. Despite their vastly different circumstances, there was a core of shared understanding between them, of loss, of responsibility, of having to redefine who you were in the aftermath of tragedy. After dinner, they settled in the library with glasses of wine, sitting close together on a comfortable sofa. A fire crackled in the fireplace, casting a warm glow over the room. "This doesn't feel real," Elena confessed, looking around at the beautiful room with its shelves of leather-bound books. "Being here with you like this." "It is real," Damien assured her, his arm draped casually across her shoulders. "Maybe more real than anything else in my life right now. But tomorrow I go back to New Jersey," Elena reminded him, "back to hospital shifts and bills and real life." Damien was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine in his glass. "What if there was a way to combine our worlds?" he finally asked. "Your real life and whatever this is between us." Elena's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" I mean, Damien set his glass down and turned to face her. Elena, I know we've only known each other for 3 days. I know this is fast and probably crazy, but there's something between us that I haven't felt in a very long time, maybe ever. And I don't want to lose it when you get on that plane tomorrow. I don't want to lose it either, Elena admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I don't see how this works, Damien. Your life is here, and in Boston, and New York, and wherever your business takes you. Mine is in New Jersey, with Tommy. And my job. I can come to New Jersey, Damien said, as if it were the most obvious solution in the world. I can work from anywhere, and you could visit me sometimes, weekends, days off. The idea was tempting, so tempting that Eleanor was afraid to believe it could be real. Long-distance relationships are hard enough when both people live normal lives, she pointed out. Add in our differences and I just don't know. What differences? Damien challenged, taking her hands in his. So I have money and you don't. So what? That's circumstance, not character. It's not just the money, Eleanor tried to explain. It's the worlds we live in, the expectations, the possibilities. Tell me what you're really afraid of, Damien said softly. Elena looked into his eyes, finding the courage to be completely honest. I'm afraid that once the novelty wears off, once you've had your fill of real life with the struggling nurse from New Jersey, you'll move on, and I'll be left picking up the pieces of my heart while you jet off to your next adventure. Damien's expression softened with understanding. Eleanor, you're not a novelty to me. He paused, searching for the right words. You're like coming up for air after being underwater for too long. You make me feel alive again, connected, like maybe there's still good in the world worth fighting for. His words touched something deep inside her, a place that had been closed off since her parents died, a place where hope lived. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too, Damien confessed, surprising her. I'm terrified of messing this up, of not being good enough for you, of dragging you into a world that might hurt you. But I'm more afraid of letting you go without even trying to make this work. He reached up to cup her face gently. I'm not asking for promises, Elena. I'm just asking for a chance, for both of us. The tenderness in his touch, the sincerity in his voice, they were Elena's undoing. She leaned forward, closing the small distance between them, and pressed her lips to his. Damien responded immediately, his arms wrapping around her as he deepened the kiss. It was gentle at first, then increasingly urgent, as if they were both trying to communicate everything they couldn't yet say in words. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Damien rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes? He asked, a hint of his usual confidence returning. Elena smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. It's a let's try, she clarified. One day at a time. I'll take it, Damien murmured before kissing her again. Later that night, as they stood at the threshold of her guest room, there was a moment of uncertainty. The attraction between them was undeniable, but Eleanor wasn't ready to take that step yet, not when everything was still so new, so fragile. Good night, Damien, she said softly, placing a gentle kiss on his cheek. He seemed to understand without her having to explain. Good night, Elena, he replied, squeezing her hand before letting her go. Sweet dreams. As she closed the door, Elena leaned against it, her heart full of conflicting emotions. Excitement, fear, hope, and something deeper that she wasn't quite ready to name. Their last day in France dawned bright and clear. They spent it exploring the countryside around Damien's house, visiting a small chateau, having lunch at a centuries-old vineyard, and walking through fields of wildflowers that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was a perfect day, made bittersweet by the knowledge that it would end with Elena on a plane back to New Jersey. As the afternoon waned, they returned to the house to collect Elena's few belongings before the drive to the airport. In her room, she found a small wrapped package on the bed with a note in Damien's handwriting. Something to remember our time in Paris. D. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant shaped like the Eiffel Tower. It was beautiful, but not ostentatious. Exactly the kind of thing Elena would have chosen for herself if she could have afforded such a luxury. She put it on immediately, the pendant resting just above her heart. It felt right there, a tangible reminder of these magical days. Downstairs, Damien was waiting in the foyer, her backpack already in hand. His face brightened when he saw the necklace. "You like it?" he asked, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "It's perfect," Elena assured him, touching the pendant gently. "Thank you." The drive to the airport was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. As they approached the terminal, Damien finally broke the silence. "I've arranged for a private lounge where we can wait until boarding," he said. "Unless you'd prefer." "The main terminal?" Elena shook her head. "The lounge is fine." The thought of saying goodbye to Damien in a crowded airport terminal was too much to bear. The private lounge was luxurious but tasteful, with comfortable seating and large windows overlooking the runways. A staff member discreetly took Elena's boarding pass, promising to let them know when it was time to board. Once they were alone, Damien pulled Elena into his arms, holding her close as if trying to memorize the feel of her. "I've arranged for a car to meet you at JFK," he said against her hair. "It will take you straight home." "You didn't have to do that," Elena protested weakly. "I wanted to," Damien replied, pulling back to look into her eyes. "It's the least I can do." "When will I see you again?" Elena asked, the question that had been weighing on her mind all day. "I have meetings in Boston through Wednesday," Damien said. "But I could fly to New Jersey on Thursday evening if that works for you." The idea that he would rearrange his schedule to see her so soon made Elena's heart swell. "Thursday would be perfect. I'm off Friday." "Then it's a date," Damien said, a smile spreading across his face. "Our first official date." "What would you call the past 3 days?" Elena asked, raising an eyebrow. "The prologue," Damien replied, kissing her lightly. "The best prologue I've ever read." The announcement that her flight was boarding came all too soon. As they walked toward the gate, Damien kept a possessive arm around her waist, as if reluctant to let her go even for a moment. At the security checkpoint, the furthest point Damien could accompany her, they stopped. This was it. The end of their fairy tale interlude and the beginning of whatever came next. "Call me when you land," Damien said, his voice rough with emotion. "I don't care what time it is. I want to know you're safe." "I will," Elena promised, fighting back tears. Why was this so hard? She'd known him for only 3 days, but they hadn't been ordinary days. They had been days of connection, of understanding, of finding something neither of them had been looking for, but both desperately needed. "Eleanor," Damien said, taking her face in his hands, "these past 3 days have been... I don't even have words for what they've been." "Life-changing?" Eleanor suggested, managing a small smile despite the tightness in her throat. "Exactly," Damien agreed. "And I want you to know that whatever happens next, whatever challenges we face in trying to make this work, I'm all in. 100%. The sincerity in his voice, the intensity in his eyes, they left no room for doubt. Whatever this was between them, Damien felt it just as strongly as she did. "I'm all in too," Eleanor whispered, surprised by how true the words felt. Damien pulled her close for one last kiss, deep and passionate and full of promise. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, he pressed his forehead to hers. "This isn't goodbye," he said firmly. "It's just, see you soon." "See you soon," Eleanor echoed, forcing herself to step back, to turn away, to walk toward security, and away from the most extraordinary 3 days of her life. As she handed her boarding pass to the security officer, Elena glanced back one last time. Damien was still standing where she'd left him, watching her go with an expression that made her heart ache in the best possible way. The flight back to New York felt surreal. Elena sat in first class, Damien's doing, of course, surrounded by business travelers and wealthy tourists. 3 days ago, she would have felt completely out of place. Now she simply reclined her seat and closed her eyes, remembering Paris streets and countryside picnics and the feel of Damien's hand in hers. When the plane landed at JFK, it was late evening. As promised, a driver was waiting with a sign bearing her name. The black town car that whisked her through New York traffic and across the bridge to New Jersey was a stark contrast to the bus she would normally have taken. True to her word, She called Damien as soon as she was in the car. "You landed safely?" he asked, answering on the first ring. "Yes, just now. The car is very nice, thank you." "You're welcome," Damien said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "How was the flight?" "Lonely," Eleanor admitted. "I kept turning to tell you something and remembering you weren't there." "I know exactly what you mean," Damien said softly. "My house feels empty without you in it." They talked until the car pulled up in front of Elena's modest apartment building. The contrast between Damien's world and hers had never been more apparent than in that moment. The luxury car idling outside the slightly run-down building where she rented a two-bedroom walk-up. "I'm home," she told Damien, a touch of self-consciousness creeping into her voice. "I should go. Tommy's probably waiting up." "Of course," Damien said. "Call me tomorrow." "I will," Elena promised. "Good night, Damien." "Good night, Elena." Sweet dreams. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, Elena felt like she was moving between worlds, from the fairy tale of Paris and Damien back to the reality of her everyday life. Tommy was indeed waiting up, eager to hear all about her unexpected adventure. As she told him a carefully edited version of the past 3 days, Elena found herself touching the Eiffel Tower pendant around her neck, a tangible reminder that it hadn't all been a dream. Later, lying in her own familiar bed, so different from the luxurious accommodations she'd grown accustomed to, Elena stared at the ceiling, wondering how she would ever reconcile these two parts of her life. How could Damien Carter, with his private jets and country estates, ever truly fit into her world of hospital shifts and budget concerns? And yet, as she drifted off to sleep, she found herself not worried but hopeful. Because underneath all the external differences, she and Damien had connected on a level that transcended wealth or status. They had seen each other, really seen each other in a way that felt rare and precious. Thursday couldn't come soon enough. The next few days passed in a blur of normalcy that felt anything but normal to Elena. She went back to work at the hospital, did laundry, helped Tommy with college applications and paid bills. But through it all there was a new lightness in her step, a glow that her colleagues noticed and commented on. "What happened on that trip?" her friend Megan asked during their lunch break. "You're different." "Good different or bad different?" Eleanor asked, unable to suppress a smile. "Good," Megan decided, studying her face. "Really good. Like you've woken up or something." That was exactly how it felt, like Elena had been sleepwalking through her life for the past 2 years and had suddenly opened her eyes to find the world brighter, more vibrant, full of possibilities she'd forgotten existed. She and Damien talked every day, sometimes just quick calls to say good morning or good night, sometimes hour-long conversations that left her smiling long after they'd ended. He was in Boston for meetings, as he'd said, but he sent her photos of his day and asked about hers, creating a bridge between their separate lives. On Thursday morning, Eleanor woke to a text from Damien. "Can't wait to see you tonight. My flight lands at 6. Dinner at 7:30? She texted back immediately. "Can't wait either. 7:30 is perfect." As she got ready for work, Eleanor found herself wondering what Damien would think of her apartment, her neighborhood, her real life. Would he be put off by the simplicity of it all? Would he finally realize how different their worlds truly were? But as she touched the silver pendant that hadn't left her neck since he'd given it to her, Elena pushed those doubts aside. Damien had seen who she was from the beginning. Tired nurse, responsible sister, ordinary woman with ordinary problems. And he'd chosen her anyway. That evening, Elena took extra care with her appearance, settling on a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes and the silver Eiffel Tower necklace that now meant so much to her. Tommy, who had been surprisingly supportive of her budding relationship with Damien, gave her a thumbs up as she emerged from her bedroom. "You look great, sis," he said sincerely. "Billionaire guy won't know what hit him." "His name is Damien," Eleanor reminded him, though she couldn't help but smile at her brother's enthusiasm. "And please try not to call him billionaire guy to his face." "No promises," Tommy teased, then grew more serious. "He makes you happy, doesn't he?" Eleanor nodded, touched by her brother's concern. "He does. It's new and complicated and probably a little crazy, but yes, he makes me happy." Then that's all that matters, Tommy said with a wisdom beyond his 18 years. After everything you've done for me, you deserve to be happy, Elena. Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. Elena's heart leaped. Damien was early. She opened the door to find him standing there, looking slightly less polished than usual in jeans and a casual button-down shirt, holding a bouquet of wildflowers similar to those they'd walked through in the French countryside. "Hi," he said, his eyes taking in the sight of her with an appreciation that made her blush. "Hi yourself," Elena replied, stepping back to let him in. "You're early." "I couldn't wait," Damien admitted, handing her the flowers. These reminded me of our walk. "They're beautiful," Elena said, deeply touched by the thoughtful gesture. "Come in, I want you to meet Tommy." As Elena watched Damien and her brother shake hands and exchange greetings, she was struck by how natural it felt to have him here in her apartment. He didn't look out of place or uncomfortable. He looked right, like he belonged. "Nice place," Damien said, glancing around the modest living room with its second-hand furniture and family photos. "It's not much," Elena said, suddenly self-conscious despite herself. "It's a home," Damien corrected her gently. "A real home. You can feel it the moment you walk in." The simple observation, so sincere and appreciative, eased some of the tension. Elena hadn't even realized she was carrying. This was who Damien was, beneath the wealth and privilege, a man who understood what truly mattered. Exhausted nurse Elena Morris stumbles onto a private jet and into billionaire Damien Carter's world. A twist of fate sends her soaring toward a life she never imagined. But will reality bring her back down? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. They went to a small Italian restaurant in Elena's neighborhood, a family-owned place where the pasta was homemade and the owner knew Elena by name. It wasn't fancy or expensive, but the food was excellent and the atmosphere warm and inviting. "This is perfect," Damien said, as they settled into a corner booth. "Exactly the kind of place I was hoping you'd choose." "Really?" Elena asked, surprised. "I thought you might prefer something more upscale." Damien shook his head. "I spend too much time in upscale restaurants with people who only care about being seen. This is much better, somewhere real with someone real." Over dinner they talked about their days apart, catching up on the details they hadn't shared in their calls and texts. Damien told her about his meetings in Boston, about the challenges of stepping back into a leadership role at the company after months of semi-absence. "Mark's death left a huge hole," he explained, "not just personally, but in the company. He was the creative genius behind most of our best products. I'm more of the business guy." "And now?" Elena asked. "Now I'm trying to find a new path forward," Damien said thoughtfully. "For the company and for myself, being with you these past few days has helped me see things more clearly." "How so?" "You remind me that there's more to life than work, than success, than money," he explained. "Watching you talk about your patients, your brother, it's obvious that you find meaning in caring for others. It made me realize that I've been looking for meaning in all the wrong places." The conversation flowed easily as they shared a bottle of wine and a tiramisu for dessert. By the time they left the restaurant, walking hand in hand back to Elena's apartment, it felt as if they'd been doing this for years, rather than having just met less than a week ago. At her door, Damien pulled her close, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "When can I see you again?" he asked, his voice husky. "I'm off tomorrow," Elena reminded him. "And the weekend." "Perfect," Damien said, his eyes lighting up. "I've cleared my schedule for the next 3 days. I thought maybe I could take you somewhere, anywhere you want to go." Elena smiled, an idea forming. "Actually, there is somewhere I'd like to go, but it's not Paris or Rome or anywhere fancy." "Name it," Damien said immediately. "It's yours." "The state park where my dad used to take us camping," Elena said. "It's beautiful this time of year. We could rent a cabin for the weekend, hike the trails, sit by the lake." Damien looked surprised, then pleased. "I haven't been camping since college," he admitted, "and never in a cabin. It sounds perfect." His enthusiasm for her simple suggestion touched Elena deeply. Here was a man who could take her anywhere in the world, and he was genuinely excited about a weekend in a rustic cabin in a New Jersey state park. "It's settled then," she said, kissing him again. Our first real vacation, together. The first of many, Damien promised. As he walked away, turning back once to wave before disappearing down the stairs, Elena felt a sense of certainty wash over her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and there would be many in this unlikely relationship, they would face them together, because sometimes the wrong plane leads to exactly the right destination, and sometimes the heart finds its home in the most unexpected places. At the top of the stairs in her modest apartment building, with the silver Eiffel Tower pendant warm against her skin, Elena whispered the words she hadn't yet said aloud, but felt with every fiber of her being. "I love you, Damien Carter." And somewhere across the city, in a luxury hotel suite with a view of the lights of New Jersey across the water, Damien was making plans for a future he'd never imagined, but now couldn't live without. A future with Elena Morris, the woman who had accidentally boarded his private jet and permanently changed the course of his life. The end.